So I can say unreservedly, we did save the best for last. So this is our 6th session that we've had from the Dell Technologies perspective. This is one that we've been chewing on, goodness, for a couple of years now, thinking about all the capabilities that are available around hybrid and hybrid cloud. And this is going to be very demo heavy. So not going to apologize because this is SQL bits. You want to actually see detail. This is some of the cutting edge thought leadership stuff that we've been working with Microsoft, especially as we started to see the goodness started back in SQL 2016. And we've been chewing through this, and now with SQL 2022 and the capabilities that we have with Arc and Arc Data Services, SQL Managed Instance, SQL Business Continuity. This is going to be some really cool stuff that might not be applicable for you today, but is absolutely going to be applicable before you know it. And getting ahead of this is really important. Most of this session, Rob is going to lead, so do you want to kick off with the intro?
I can. I got to make sure I watch my time, as always. So again, still me, and still Pembroke Wells Corgis.
Hey, Rob.
And Steve.
Turn that right there.
Oh,
hit that little button.
Hit this little button. I want some. Which button do we have to hit there?
I think it slides at the top. Yeah, that one.
I don't think this is on. Is it maybe I have to shake it? Does it charge like that? Oh, no. Battery's dead. Oh, there it comes. No, it's fine. No, not at all.
Now it works. I hear you.
Now it works. You hear me? Okay.
Sibilance, resonance.
So, okay, still Rob and still Corgis and Steve. Okay, go ahead. Well, everybody heard me the first time. I'm just having fun with it.
Absolutely. So Steve McMaster, I've been with Dell for about 24 years and the Microsoft Alliance for 10. Yeah, Rob, I think we're going to spend a lot of time on demos, so I don't know how quickly you want to kick into it. We'd love your interaction. So if we're going too fast or if the detail is a little too small, let us know. Some of this stuff will expand so it'll be a little bit more visible as we go. But we're going to get in the weeds here a little bit. So
yeah, let's just go into it here. So first I have to set the table, right? You probably saw this slide on probably 60% of my sessions earlier around all things, well, currently today, Azure Arc. Today, or this session, we're just going to be right here today. We're going to be in apps and SQL MI specifically, and it's going to require all of these things. Kubernetes, Linux, Dell, storage, compute, you name it, the whole stack. But that's where we're going to be, that's where this session is specifically around. But first and foremost, actually, I kind of probably said that a little wrong. Let's go back here. Right out of the gate, remember, we still have Arc-enabled servers for SQL Server. So I'll talk about that quickly just to separate the far left of the screen and the far right of the screen. Arc-enabled SQL Server, so you can enable your existing SQL servers right now, virtual or physical, Windows or Linux. You can enable them right now. You can go back to 14, is that right? SQL 2014?
I think that's right. And the capability of interaction decreases the farther back you go. So
that's right.
2022 has a bunch of steroids in it.
Yep.
It's uber cool.
Yep. But this is, I mean, and some people ask me, well, why would I do this? We have a lot of big clients that I've worked with where they have SQL servers everywhere, not to mention under someone's desk or under desks all over the world. This helps you kind of organize them and map them out using things even like Map Toolkit and then pull them all, Arc-enable all of those SQL servers. Governance and security, role-based access. This space is only going to get stronger with Microsoft for sure. Managing SQL servers at scale. And what's kind of interesting here is you can actually, well, when you're doing your install, if you care to use the GUI, hopefully you only do this once, build your config ini file and move on. You can Arc-enable your SQL Server during the install. This is also cool right now. Pay-as-you-go licensing. What does that mean, Rob? Well, that means you have consumption-based licensing now options for on-premises SQL Server. Kind of cool. Really cool, actually. What does that do for you? That allows you to maybe tune your workload. It's funny from my perspective when I work with clients, I see so many SQL servers that are wildly over provisioned, running 20, 30% on a average basis, and I kind of have to go, why? Because that's a lot of money you're giving to Microsoft for spare CPU. It's because you maybe think you're going to need more. Pay as you go lets you kind of fine tune that workload, maybe creep it up a little bit as you need to. So I like that option. That was first announced at Ignite last year in the fall. That's pretty cool. And then here is the adding the extension for SQL Server, obviously your subscription, your principal ID, and your secret, et cetera, and pump that in. This actually, ironically, does not work right now when you're installing SQL Server in a VMware environment. I found that out. I sent it to Microsoft. I'm like, guys, can you fix this, please? But you can always enable your SQL Server after the fact. It's just during this install that's a little, it's an enhancement that needs to be taken care of. Not a bug, but an enhancement. Yeah, let's see. That's the same one from before, but it's got the pay-as-you-go billing model there in the middle. Pretty awesome. So right out of the gate, I want to jump into some demos here around data services. Nope, I don't want to do that yet. First, I want to show you, this is a paper we did with Microsoft with Dell PowerStore backend and Power Edge servers. I think those actually had Intel in the box, I think. And we built a 3 replica HA, high availability group, ran a bunch of testing, got some load testing for Microsoft, wrote the TPC metrics out, et cetera. It's all in that paper. And again, infohub.delltechnologies.com is a really cool place to go. Just put SQL in the search and you'll get a bunch of artifacts back. But the cool thing about this one, and I'm going to show this here in a second, is we built that 3 replica business critical always on group. And the slide says 2 minutes. It actually took about 2 minutes and 60. In my demo, and I'm going to tell you why, it takes exactly 6 minutes. There's reasons why that does it like this. I wanted to show something a little different than this slide and to help everybody understand where the simple nuances are or differences with Kubernetes is when you deploy Azure Arc-enabled data services SQL Server. But yeah, 60-second deploy, 2-minute HA, 2-minute HA if you already have the image down, and I'll show you that here in a second. And that top metric, which really ruffled a lot of feathers, you remember this, 15% faster than a comparably equipped, sound like a car commercial, a comparably equipped SQL Server running in a virtual machine with a 3 replica always on group. 15% faster running, and this was bare metal Kubernetes, mind you. So that was our only difference. Maybe it was the HBAs and the virtualization layer, I do not know, but we got 15% faster running an Arc-enabled SQL MI with a business critical 3 replica design. So we know, if we know anything about always on groups, we know we're committing logs to a secondary, right? We're doing all of this, so that takes a little bit of latency. Or I'm sorry, that introduces potentially a little bit of latency. Yeah, so that one, when that got out, even in Microsoft, I got some calls. I remember Bob Ward even calling me, Rob, what is this? Well, we did it with your company. So it was kind of an interesting metric. Anyway, we'll dig into that more. So again, the topology, Dell kit, we've got a 3 named 7525 cluster here. This was actually the AMD one with a cluster name, and then building this one just a single namespace for the Arc SQL MIs that I dumped them into. And then you have the data controller, which comes with a lot of square boxes there, FluentBit, CollectD, and also the Arc HA supervisor gets deployed over here as part of the Arc managed instance. There's actually 4 containers, inclusive of Arc SQL MI, inside the pod that makes up a SQL managed instance. Remember, the smallest unit of work for Kubernetes is a pod. You should be a 1-to-1, 1 container, 1 for 1 pod, but Microsoft pushes the envelope, and this is fine to do. You can introduce multiple containers into one pod if the containers are very closely related with regards to doing the same work. In this case, fluent bit, writing out metrics and collectees, storing the logs. And of course, SQL Server's in there too as an executable. So another topology that we did, this was from a different paper. This is Azure Stack HCI. I showed this one a couple days ago. I carved out two namespaces, one for databases, which was the SQL MIs, and I did one over here for apps, which was HammerDB, also in a container. I'm not going to show this environment today. I showed it a couple days ago. It's online. You can find it. It's a pretty cool one. The paper we did on this one, refreshed, just dropped last week. So there'll be some links at the end. Architecture for Arc-enabled data services. Any CNCF here, all the usual suspects of icons, Tanzu, tomato,
Sure.
tomato, yeah, OpenShift, and Kubernetes, upstream Kubernetes, they're all in play, Rancher. So any CNCF, just give me Kubernetes and I will deploy the data controller from there. And after I have the data controller, then I put down my managed instances. I manage them with kubectl or AZCLI. I do this all day, every day. It's super easy once you start doing it. And also telemetry and billing from the data controller only. That's the only GAC that's sent out to Microsoft is this. Not your data from your managed instances, only metrics about billing and what you're running. And you're managing those things with the same tools that you already use, SSMS, Azure Data Studio, Visual Studio Code, of course PowerShell, any command line tool. So let's get into a demo. Let me watch this sleight of hand here. I better put on these so I can see what I'm doing. So first deployment. So here I am right out of the gate deploying a business critical. Can we see that okay, or should I zoom up a little bit?
There you go. Can you zoom up?
Yeah, hold on. So I deployed this business critical here. I see what's going on. Right there using AZ SQL MI Arc-create. This is AZ CLI. 4 lines of code only because I have some carriage returns. I could do this all in one line. But you see what I have there. I've got a tier business critical, which is the always on group. I define my cores requested and limit and memory. Storage class backups. Pause here for a second. For a business critical deployment to be effective, I love this with the black background, it turns everything. Okay, right here I have storage class backups, power store, NFS, retain. So I actually, on the power store environment, I built an NFS share where my backups write to. What are those backups, Rob? Well, they're SQL backups, they're T-logs. It allows me to get back to that point in time from a business critical perspective. It also allows failover to happen effectively and another pod to write to the same persistent volume claim. That's a Kubernetes construct. So if you're writing this just to block storage, your results may vary. Another car commercial. But if you have NFS is what Microsoft recommends, read-write many is really what you're trying to get to from a Kubernetes construct. So one pod is writing the backups, failover happens, then another pod is writing to that same share. That's what you need with RWX. That's what NFS gives you. And I'm going to show some interesting nuances on that here in just a second. So I'll take a look. There are my, take a look at my events right now, what's deploying. And this is just all kubectl commands. Inside a namespace, Arc services NS, just because I have to name everything exactly what it is. And let's just watch. So this is the deployment running right now of a 3 replica business critical replica. And it takes, if you saw earlier and I mentioned, it's going to take about 6 minutes compared to that 2 minutes and 50 seconds. And why is that? Because, and you'll see, not here in the events just yet. Yes, actually, right here, successfully pulled image from MCR, the Microsoft registry. So I have my data controller. You remember the data controller is the traffic cop for the entire environment. I have my data controller set for this environment because I wanted to see what the difference was to always pool the containers, to always pool. When we did the document with Microsoft, that was the 2 minutes and 50 seconds, it was if not present, 2 different types of settings. So what does if not present mean? If not present means only get it if it is not present, the container. This data controller I set to always. So every single time I make a deployment, it's going to go look and get the images from Microsoft Container Registry. I only did this because I just wanted to see what the real difference was, which is why this one takes a little bit longer. But who's splitting hairs? 3 minutes, 6 minutes to do an always-on group? It's pretty awesome how fast this is. Make sure I'm still running here. Yep, so we look at my services. You see I'm creating right there the business critical 0.1 with a 0, 1, and 2. So I've got a 3-pod replica deploying. And I'm just running git pods here over and over back to the events just to watch what's getting events that are happening. You see my PVCs are attaching to my CSI driver volumes down here on the power store. This is all done behind the scenes. This is all done for me, by the way. Attaching the volumes, again, going out and pulling from the Microsoft Container Registry. This is version 1.16. It's worth noting, too, I talked about this the other day, that this is updated about once a month. The data controller, for sure, is updated once a month on Patch Tuesday. It used to not be Patch Tuesday. It used to be random when we were even before GA. But the data controller from Microsoft is updated every month on Patch Tuesday. So it is not a set it and forget it. Nothing in the big Kubernetes world is a set it and forget it, period. So note to self there, which opens up more dependencies to think through. So we're still deploying. Again, it's going and pulling all these images. Looks like I got one created. It's not doing this in parallel, it's doing it serially. I have tried to deploy multiple MIs at the same time to the tune of 10, 15, 20 of them, and I need to add more resources to my data controller, kind of brought it to its knees. So that's for another demo. There we are. The running, you saw that. I'll get back to it here in a second. But I don't have all the containers running inside the pod yet. Let's jump up to the portal real quick. Just a quick refresh. I see already that business critical is being logged. This is the telemetry and metrics coming outside of the data controller up to the portal. So I can see I have a brand new business critical deployed there. And then I'll stop this for a second. You see with 0 and with 2, 3 of the 4 containers are deployed inside the pod. So it's just about done at 2 minutes and 22 seconds. Just about done. Yep, there we go. So now all 4 of 4 are done. Let's get back out of this Zoom. It's at 5 minutes and 19 seconds. I started the stopwatch here right before we started. I'll let it keep going here a little while longer. It still shows me at the bottom there, you see that current state is creating way down here. It's, for all intents and purposes, done. We're just setting up all 3 replicas talking to each other from an HA perspective, and at 6 minutes, there you go, all done. So what do I get back? I get back my IP addresses, my versions. I can also get them later. I'll scroll up here to the results that came back. Business Critical 01, complete, 6 minutes. And that's it. That's pretty awesome. So now I want to jump, actually let's jump, before we go to that demo, let me make sure I don't have, let me go to here. No, let's do another demo right now. Let's just keep the demo vibe going. So this one's pretty cool. And I was speaking with you earlier, Paul, about this is where I'm using Windows tools to do Linux things because I want DBAs to embrace this type of environment because this, so I'm kind of trying to create that bridge or that handshake across the aisle. Because I've actually had some DBAs working with our services teams that have told me they don't like this SQL and Arc yet because it doesn't have certain functionality in the GUI. They want to check a box to say, like, deploy the agent in the portal. I had a DBA tell me this. It goes, it's not ready for prime time because I can't deploy the agent. I said, yes, you can deploy the agent. It's one line of CLI. Highlight it and press F5. He said, nope, I want it in a box in the portal. I thought, well, I kept telling him, it's not a bug, script it. And he told me it was a bug. So we just agreed to disagree. I can't. This is the way it's going, folks. That's why I feel so strong about learning all of these tools. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a mount point, and I'm going to preserve a backup after the entire pod has been deleted. That's kind of a big deal for DBAs. Make sure we still have our data. But I'm going to use some Windows tools to do it, with the only caveat that I do have WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux, installed on my jump host, this jump host. Windows Subsystem for Linux, I use it a ton. I use Ubuntu. So there's the Business Critical MI, same one we created. There's his endpoint with his port, different from Azure Stack HCI, where we were using a load balancer. This is node port, so the port that gets generated there is a little more random. Not a big deal, it just is what it is. Here I am in SSMS connecting to it. Look at that. There is Azure Arc 16.0. A bunch of numbers. And this is the Business Critical deployed on Ubuntu. So we know SQL Server is running right there on an actual Linux host. It's actually running on Mariner OS. That's the interesting part about this to think about. A good point here. So when I run that version with SQL Server, it says Business Critical on Linux Ubuntu. This is actually running on a container running on Mariner OS. Actually, you know what? No, this one was running on Ubuntu. I'm sorry. I'm munging Dell Labs. That's what just happened right there. Put them all in a blender, Rob. So that is actually correct. So I'm going to copy a DB simply into a container. But what am I going to do first? What I just did down there on the bottom is actually bash into the container. I bashed into the actual Arc SQL container right here. That's the container name, Arc SQL, inside this pod. Remember, we have more than one container. So I'm just going to bash into it. Here I am. I have no name, Business Critical. And now I'm at the root of that container. Pretty cool. var opt MS SQL, you're going to get used to doing that a lot in this environment. Everything is there. Backups, LS. Nothing in there yet, except for current and current temp. Great. So I'll back out of that. Now what I want to do here real quick is I'm using, you see I highlighted WSL, so Windows Subsystem for Linux, because I like to use grep. Grep is actually a really nice Linux piece of search functionality that works really, really well when you're searching Linux nodes that are running your containers, which is why I love that piping it into WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux, and then grep whatever variable I passed in. In this case, it's called Business Critical 01. What I'm trying to do here is just find that backup location for that PVC, for that persistent volume claim. So I'm saying kubectl get PVC inside a namespace, dump it out to YAML, use Windows Subsystem for Linux, and grep that MI name. So run that real quick. Got a lot of locations here came back. I've got if you look at some of this, you can see data. If you look at the prefix, actually, you see data, a bunch of numbers, data logs, just that. That's the LDFs. In data is the MDFs. Logs is everything else, like event logs, etc. So those are all the PVCs that make up a pod for the business critical deployment. But specifically, I want the backup one. So now, let me go ahead and grep. I'll find the backup one, and I think I quickly grab the backup name here and paste it into here. Nope, I'm going to go get everything that's backups. So that backups one, that CSI volume I have right there on the bottom left is the volume that contains my PVC, my persistent volume claim, from my backups. This is the RWX volume, the read-write many volume. And now this is where this gets pretty cool. I'm going to mount that CSI volume with Windows, because I want to copy the backup into the Linux container, but I want to use Windows tools to do it. I don't want to use a bunch of command line, because I'm at that point as a DBA where I'm trying to get into command line, but I still want my Windows tools. So that's where I'm at. So I'll copy that CSI volume. There's my Power Store Manager interface. Dell has really nice interfaces. They all look exactly the same, which is really nice. That's the volume. I know it only because the last 4 digits, 73EI, is usually how I look at these things. I do have to give access to this volume. That's one point to mention. So I'm going to change this default access up here in that drop-down to read-write. And, of course, allow root. So now I simply want to mount this folder using Windows tools. Run the mount. I'm going to call that mount drive X. And it's mounted. So now let's look at X. There it is. Current temp. Those are the same 2 folders that we saw when we bashed into the container, into the backup directory, actually. So this is all the way down to the backup directory inside the Arc SQL MI container. Make sense? That's pretty cool. But I'm using Windows tools to do it right now. Now, what do I want to do? I want to take AdventureWorks, because that's the theme of this conference. I want to copy it in there. Boom, done. Almost done, 99% done. So now let's bash back in, just to make sure AdventureWorks made it in there. I'll bash back in. var opt ms SQL. Backups, ls. There it is. Back file, and there's that zone identifier file that also goes in there just as a Linux construct. So I can refresh over here, and there's that same zone identifier. So now I am the same. You see, via Windows, looking all the way into a Kubernetes environment, inside a container, inside a pod. It's exactly the same, bash in or from a Windows tool. But wait, there's more. I know you're at the edge of your seats. This is so much fun, this command line. So now I want to delete the instance. But first I actually want to add this. The first thing I want to do is I actually want to restore, before I delete it, I want to restore AdventureWorks to this instance. Now I can't just do that with a regular restore command with that mount point. I need to actually expose a Kubernetes service, because what I'm looking at via SSMS is actually via the node port. So think about that as like a listener construct, if that makes any sense. I'm looking at it through the lens of a listener, but I want to actually connect to the server, and I can't use a capital there, Rob, so that's going to error. Let me change that to a lowercase, Rob, and run it again. So I just exposed the service 1533. I made a service called suffix with Rob just because I wanted to know what it was when I look at all the services. So I exposed this pod. So now I'll be able to connect right to the Arc SQL instance that's running inside that pod directly without going through the load balancer, because I actually have to restore it that way and actually add it back to the always-on group. So look at all the services. That second service up there, Business Critical 01 External Service -Rob, that's the one I created. And you see that it maps, and this is actually interesting to read, it maps 30657 to 1533. So what I want is the 30657 and that same IP address I had previously from the node port to connect to the actual SQL instance, not through the load balancer. Not through the load balancer. There it is. So I'll just drop that there so I have it as a reference. There's that same IP address, but I'm going to change the port, 30657. I'm going to log in again with my same complex username and password. I'm going to type it correctly this time. There we go. So in the Object Explorer there on the left, you see I'm connected to the same IP address, 2 different ports. It's actually the same server. But this server that's second, the same instance, let's be clear. The second connection has the always-on high availability. That's what I'm trying to get to, because now I'm connected to the actual instance. There's the groups, there's Business Critical. This is also a CAG, a Contained Availability Group. Have you heard that one this week? Yeah, more new technology. I'm full of acronyms, but I actually explain them more than some other people do, okay? Because I'm a non-acronym guy, just explain them, please. This is a Contained Availability Group. What is that? That means the master and the MSDB are part of the availability group. What does that mean? When you fail over, so I'm sure everyone in here probably started with always-on groups, and you've built jobs to create logins and jobs to move to the secondaries and up to 8 replicas. That's painful. Now, the MSDB, thank you, is part of the CAG. So when you fail over, all your logins and jobs are already over there. That's what a contained availability group is. That's a construct that's just deployed as part of a business critical always-on group. It's just there by default. A CAG. And you can actually use a contained availability group now also with just standalone SQL Server 2. There you go. If you saw that, you saw the master, you see there on the left, the master and the MSD are also synchronized. It's exactly what it is. So now I'm going to use the GUI again to restore that back file that I copied into that container inside that pod. I could use T-SQL, I could use anything. But I chose to use the GUI right there. That points into var opt MS SQL for this server. There's the AdventureWorks that I copied in using GUI. And run it, boom, done. Restored successfully, AdventureWorks. That's great. There it is, var opt MS SQL data log. We talked about that earlier, how the PVCs get separated. Great. Now I have to add it back to the always-on group. So super easy. Let's bring this cool T-SQL over to SSMS. Look at the server name. So there's my primary and my 2 secondaries below. We all know this. And all I'm going to do is alter it, set it to full. Make a backup first, and then add it to the group. Done. Now it's synchronized. Refresh that. There's AdventureWorks added to the Business Critical 3 replica group. There's the master and MS3, so everything right there is the actual CAG. What is that? Contained Availability Group. It's all there. Done. Now I have high availability with my environment, but wait, there's more. I know, you're at the edge of your seat. Let's delete the service to clean up nefarious acts. So the service is gone, so I can no longer connect to that. Now I'm going to actually delete the pod. Oh no, pod is gone. I just deleted the pod. And I also actually, when I do this type of cleanup, and I'm going to stop here for a second, because when I first started working with Arc SQL MIs, I would create probably hundreds of pods, and I never cleaned up the PVCs, because they remain, they persist. Data logs, and the backups further down.
It's kind of their name, right, Rob?
What's that?
Persistence? It's kind of the name.
It is. Yeah, it is. But it persists so much that one of my admin friends in, I think it was Lamia's environment, the HCI environment, one morning we got up and we had all kinds of storage errors. And of course, I pointed the finger at him, he pointed the finger at me, typical sysadmin pointing DBA. It was all over again inside of Dell. No, you did it, no, you did it. And we're like, oops, I haven't been cleaning up my PVCs. So I was creating them, deleting them, and you can reattach to them too. I do a whole other demo where I actually bash into one of these PVCs and pull an MDF out. That's kind of cool too. It's all possible. So now I get in the habit of cleaning up my PVCs after I delete a pod that I am sure I no longer need. But the nice thing about NFS and PowerStore from Dell, so I just deleted all of my PVCs, persistent volume claims, that were attached to that business critical deployment. See, they're all gone. So now, the interesting thing about that, I'll stop here for a second. That mount point that was attached, that was that CSI volume that was given to that PVC. The PVC did get deleted from Kubernetes, gone. So Kubernetes says, oh, you're gone. The nice thing is I just refreshed this. The AdventureWorks backup is still there because it exists on my PowerStore appliance at this point as NFS, and I have that storage class set to retain. I have it set to retain so it doesn't get swept when some crazy guy like me does this delete commands. So it's still there. So I still have my backup. So Mr. DBA, you're safe. Your data's not going to be gone. How's my time?
You got 13.
Okay. So that's pretty awesome. 2 different backups there. Remember, you see that prep one there with the suffix of AdventureWorks 2019 prep.back. That's the one that I made right before I created the AAG. Everybody knows AAGs. You got to have full backup first before you start, right? So it's all there. Jump back into my PowerStore just because I like to show the Dell GUI. It is a nice clean GUI, I'm not going to lie. There's the, yeah, that was it, actually. Not much more to show there. So was that pretty cool or no? Here's my slide again that I like to talk about. Was that interesting from moving through a lot of different tools, a lot of different technologies? Those I used, let's see, what did we use during my demo here? Use the portal, use PowerShell, use VS Code, Linux, of course, Kubernetes, yes. Didn't use Hyper-V, didn't use OpenShift, didn't go to Windows Admin Center, could have. Used SSMS, didn't use PGM, wasn't using Postgres. Of course, Windows and Azure CLI. GitHub, I could have checked it in, it is checked in. And Notepad++, right, Paul? Well, come on. Still my favorite tool in the world. It is. So any questions, thoughts? That was a lot of like nerdy details that I'm glad you guys came to see. Anything you want to see again, please?
Actually, not see again, but more ask a potential question for future director.
Yep.
So does this imply that we should expect the GUI tools to be de-emphasized and the...
You're going to have to say that again so they pick it up.
Doesn't imply.
Okay, so does this mean that going forward, the GUI tools are going to be probably, I'm going to say, de-emphasized? Well, maybe not deprecated, but de-emphasized, with the command line being more your go-to? Or is that just your personal, what should we say, enjoyment?
It's a philosophy question.
It is.
It is.
It is.
Religious question.
Not religious.
I don't think that SSMS, tools like SSMS will ever go away. I mean, just look at this community. I mean, we've been using SSMS. I remember when SSMS first came out, because I used to do SQL with command line with 6.5, then I got a GUI. I'm like, oh, look at this, my server. But is it going to go, 10 minutes, okay. More questions, please.
Yes.
Actually, not so much more questions, more of a follow-up.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking so much as Management Studio going away, but the other things coming to become more prominent. So you had the example of the guy earlier who was going, it's not feature complete until there's a tick box.
Yep.
But the implication from what you said is there probably isn't going to be a tick box. You're going to have to learn how to do the command line because it's reproducible, it's scriptable, it's those other things, and that's
Check-inable?
built in.
You can't check in a GUI.
Not easily.
No, that's what I always tell people. Because this is why I script. I mean, I started scripting, and now I'm back scripting, and I couldn't be happier. And I've wrote, when I was consulting, I used to write run books for years, and what did I literally do? Took a screenshot of a GUI, click here, next page. Screenshot, GUI, click here. It's painful in my mind. It's painful in my mind. That's just my opinion. I think we need to learn all of these tools. Because I still fluidly move. I used a lot of SSMS there. I mean, I still do. I do that for good reason, because I know, I mean, there's another tool I can put on here from a Kubernetes construct called Lens, where I can look at multiple clusters across multiple contexts, because Kubernetes is like Inception in a huge hurry. Huge hurry. How you can get, a dream within a dream within a dream within a dream. Literally, I have to kind of pull myself out every once in a while, because I don't know where I'm at. So using GUI will always have its place. And what else I recommend, this is just me, it's a Rob statement, to start with Kubernetes, I do recommend deploying Kubernetes and doing some of the pain. It's all well documented, but it's not trivial to do it. Just deploy it locally. Go through it once or twice.
To learn it.
What's that?
To learn it.
To learn it and, kind of to coin a phrase, learn where the bodies are buried, because there's a few. Learn where the stumbling blocks are. And then you get the GUI, again, over the top, just like to your point. I'm like, oh, look at all this I can see now. Like Paul, when I was mentioning earlier, the demo I did yesterday or whenever it was, I deployed 20 SQL MIs all in a row. And then I used central management servers inside of SSMS to show them all. Central management servers is really cool, where I can run select edit version, connect to 20 SQL MIs, and get the results of all of them in one tab. So yeah, SSMS still has its place. It does. It's part of your virtual toolbox. Absolutely, but all these other things are too. That's my opinion on that.
There's an interesting philosophy that you're touching on that has to do about the ephemeralness that we have around Kubernetes, kind of like going back to the 70s and mainframe, some of the theories that were there. I don't know how old the audience is, but remember going back and doing a lot of command line stuff way back in the old school days. What's old is new again, and you saw a lot of that with what Rob was doing. At some point, you're going to see more consolidation around containerization as a service, because there's a whole generation that you were talking about earlier that was so used to just clicking buttons that's going to come back around. But the Kubernetes part of it is just, it's not quite that mature. I mean, it's mature, and customers are using it in production, but using some of the GUI overlay stuff just isn't there yet. It will be. I think it's just a matter of time, but it might be a little bit of time before you'll be able to do some click button stuff versus a command line. The value, though, of the command line is so blistering fast. And so, again, when we were first discovering this and talking with Travis over at Microsoft back at Build last year, I mean, the aha moment was the equivalence of SQL 2019 Enterprise Edition with a primary and two secondaries up and running in 2 minutes and 44 seconds. Boom. Good luck doing that, right? And it did it. And with all the persistence, so one of the other concerns was...
You can't do that with a GUI, mind you.
Not yet.
No, you can't even do that with... I mean, you can deploy a business critical replica with Azure Data Studio. It's going to take you longer than 2 minutes and 44 seconds.
Oh, absolutely, today, yeah. At some point, there'll be some convergence.
Just because of all your clicking.
Yeah. Okay. At some point, there'll be some convergence around containerization as a service. But that's a maturity statement, right? Because I remember when we first started getting awareness of containerization 6-7 years ago, you needed multiple PhDs. You needed not just a propeller on your beanie, you needed two of them and kind of rotate them, like a Chinook helicopter. I mean, that's how silly it was. The reality, though, is that people are using this today, and we at Dell, we absolutely see this is where it's going. You're going to see this over and over again. So the traditional binary idea of SQL and Windows, it's changing. And you got to get ready, because it's moving. It's moving faster than you think. Because what Microsoft's trying to do holistically is they want to run cloud native everywhere. And if I'm going to run it in my data center, if I'm going to run it at the edge, I got to use containerization. And Kubernetes is the orchestrator that I'm going to be doing on that. And whether that's a Microsoft shop or a Red Hat shop or a VMware shop, don't care, doesn't matter. I mean, I do care. But it's all those things. The answer is yes. And that's absolutely where it's going. You know, at some point, will they even have licensing anymore? Because everything will be consumption model. I mean, they already did that with Azure Stack HCI.
Yep.
Azure Stack HCI, you don't buy an OS license. It's all based off of use.
Yep.
Just like all the Azure stuff. That's absolutely where everybody's going. All right, we have just a few minutes.
Yeah, so you said something interesting. You know, so this is the space I actually kind of moved into. They asked me to join this team. So we're doing multi-cloud, actually multi-cloud, not multiple clouds. There's two different things. I said that earlier. But you can run our storage right now in AWS, coming soon to a cloud near you. This is going to open up actual real multi-cloud, especially when you think about containerization. Because containerization is the gateway drug for multi-cloud. Not virtualization, it's hard. A lot of people talk multi-cloud, nobody did it. Not really, it's really, really hard. But yeah, this is the space, keep watching here. More to come in this space for sure. This is the Apex, Dell Apex, and our multi-cloud space. But a lot of papers. We mentioned earlier, infohub.delltechnologies.com is the URL. Type in the search bar SQL or my name or a combination of both, and you get a whole bunch of really cool stuff. And we're doing more and more solutions here. A lot of really great stuff. Actually, end-to-end solutions. That one at the very top is the one I just finished last week, soup to nuts from tin to Azure Arc SQL MI, all of it in between. Pretty powerful.
And the first pass that we had on that paper at Build last year was VMware. And what he just published last week is Azure Stack HCI. Yeah. A lot of commonality between those, because it's all containerized.
Yeah.
That's a level playing field, right?
Kubernetes, just give me Kubernetes.
Yep. I think the last slide is a survey.
Yes.
So
please.
Let us know what we're thinking. Like I said, we saved the best for last. This is going down the rabbit hole, guys. Some of you are sitting there, have to wipe the drool off your chin.
So I showed this demo to McMaster a few days ago, and he's like, ooh, I don't know, Rob, it's pretty technical. I'm like, well, it is the audience, right? I mean, it's kind of what you want to see.
It is SQL bits.
Yeah. But
right.
it's so, the interesting thing, and I really thank you for coming, because like I was telling you earlier, I did a snapshot backup, core fundamental SQL stuff from maybe 5-8 years ago. The room was packed the other day, but this room is not. So this technology is still evolving, but it's train left station. Microsoft's all in here. They're not turning back.
And it's not just Microsoft.
Yeah, no.
Everybody's going down this path. So we're running into it with Oracle, we're running into it with SAP, and especially anything around big data. Kafka, all of those things are all set up containerization only.
Yeah. It's better to have smaller units of work. All the performance gains that I witnessed just with HammerDB and SQL in a container, I can really consolidate and tune it substantially. So that's all I have.
That's it.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks.